In this video I would like to say a little bit more about how to write functions. So functions are a way to, if you have to do something repetitively, you can write it into a function and just call the function, and you do not need to necessarily write the whole code every time again. So let me just start with a very simple example. Let's say I want to write a function where I multiply x, so this is anything that I put into the function, by 2. Yeah. So if I run this, now it says, okay, you have created this function, but we have not saved it. So we want to save it in a place that we can call it from. So let's call it just f. So we assign it to the letter f, and then you can see indeed here in my environment there's an extra row f under functions. So how do we call it? We call it by writing f and then adding a number, for instance, in this function. Now in this case, the way how we wrote it, the multiplication, can also be used for vectors. So let's say we're just going to put in a vector into this function. Then it says 2, 4, 6 and 8, because everything is multiplied by 2. Right, so this vector, remember again, is just the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, let's say we want to do the same thing, and I already created a matrix here. So let's say we want to do the same thing with the matrix. It actually does the same thing, but then for each element in the matrix. Now let's create a little bit more difficult function. So let's say we want to create groups out of a variable. So for this exercise I used the dataset Joule, that's from the ISWR dataset package. So if you wanna also do this for yourself, then please first download the package ISWR. Okay, let's see. So let's say we want to create 3 groups out of one variable, or we can just call it variable. So now we would like to make it a little bit bigger, so we're going to use these curly brackets. So let's say, we're going to say first we need to know how long this vector is. So I'm just going to be saved in the length of the variable. So why do we need this? And let me know, maybe it's also better not to work from the console, but to work in a because we would like to use like several lines of code, which is a little bit messy inside console. So we're going to do it here. So let's say we have now the n. So if we divide the variable, if we take from the variable, we take the first let's say we want to create 3 groups. We're going to say that each group needs to be n, size n, and then we're going to create the first group by getting from the variable those first elements from 1 up till n, and n is the size of the group. Now for the second group we can do the same thing, but now we need to of course say that it should start from actually you can start from n, and it has to go through n times 2. Group 3 is actually n times 2 until n times 3. So this is a very specific function where I can just create 3 groups. Now in each function you would like to give something back. So if you run the function you get something back. Now let's make this explicit by a return value. So as you can see, before we did this function, and let me go back to this function. Right, this was the very simple function that we did before, where you just return the last value. Now, if we would do the same thing here and not define any return value explicitly, then it would just return the group 3. But instead, we would like to include all 3 groups. Now, you need to do this as a list because it cannot return multiple objects. Yeah, so now we combine these objects together into a list, and that can be returned. Now, again, if we would just run these lines, it will just say that we have created a function, but the function is not saved in our environment. So let's save it as F2. And this is just for illustration. I mean, usually you would like to give it a name that makes sense. So let's perform this function on Joule IGF1. And indeed, it gives back a list. You see this by this double square brackets. This is the third element, so this is group 3. And these are all the values in group 2, and these are all the values of IGF1 in group 1.